Joining us today on Seconds Out is South Africa's longest-serving licensee, Jeff Ellis. Hello, Uncle Jeff.
Sean, so nice to see you, my friend. Yeah, it's been 50 years of love for the game, and being the longest-serving licensee, trust me, I've seen it all.
How did you get into it?
Well, it was we came from an area called Mayfair, and in those years you had boxing at school, so anyone that wanted to participate was had to go down to the local boxing gym. There was one in every area. There was 4 schools in our area, so it was part of life. You played soccer, you did boxing, or you did wrestling. And you grew up in an area or in a place where it was common. You either boxed when you went to the army, you boxed when you were at school, you boxed. So the boxing became part of my life, and my father took me to the local gym where Willie de Wheel was training fighters, and from there our friendship and everything else grew, and my life in boxing.
You had a brother, Ron, who's also a boxer.
Yes, Ron was a champion. He was a Natal heavyweight champion. He also stayed in the UK for a while. He fought guys like Pierre Coetzee and Robbie Williams. He lost the title. Robbie Williams beat him. And the sad part is that Robbie committed suicide not too long after that. But yes, we all, my brother and I, did a lot of training together, and we were part of the sport for a very long time.
As I understand things, you didn't keep the boxing to just inside the ring when you were a little lighty.
Like I said, you grew up, the times are different. When you grow up in the younger years, your school shoes, you've got to understand, you'd wear them till the hole formed in the bottom of the shoe, and then you'd put cardboard in the shoe, and till the cardboard wore through again. So when you live in that kind of environment and in that kind of life, it's always good fun, if you want to call it, to go out to the street and sort out what you have to sort out. So yes, we did grow up that way. Strangely enough, we came out of a beautiful home. My father was a priest. So
it's always the priests' kids who they say are the most misbehaved, eh?
I don't know about misbehaved, but I can tell you that we had a wonderful childhood, and boxing formed part of it straight in school. You're 12, 13, you're fighting juniors, then you go fighting seniors, and fights, although I never had that many amateur fights, I had enough, and in the army before I turned pro, so I did have a background. And Willie de Wheel, in fact, was the gent that started it. Earlier, just before Willie de Wheel, was Naas Boertes up in Brixton, and a place called Poppydorp, where we lived in the area. So yes, boxing became part of our life from very young.
Were you a natural boxer, or did you have to work at it?
No, look, I couldn't fight like the guys fought today. When you leave school and you don't matriculate, normally you go into a trade. So I became a tradesman, and the first company I worked for had a house full of boxers. It was Jan Kiss, it was Koos Kiss, it was Bushy Bester, it was all those guys from that era. You're an apprentice. Can you imagine what happens when you're amongst all those boxers? It's just natural that you start fighting and learning how to fight. So through the years we grew up. I was fortunate that I met my wife, Mari, as you know. She's still in the boxing. We work for Golden Gloves. And, it's just been such an inspiration and such a change with Golden Gloves. But that I'll explain to you later on. But so from the age of 12, my wife, when I met her, just turned 13 and had already come to one of my amateur fights. And I had won the fight. So, walking around with a cup and a girlfriend, what a life. We're now married 52 years and we're still together doing our thing in boxing. But to come back to how we learned from the right people. I mean, if you take a guy like Nas Botha, who was straight to the point and he was very good. He was actually a school principal, and the people that came through his school really learned how to box. Willie DeWill was, to me, one of the great trainers. I also trained under the guidance of Willie Locke, who had the first world champion in Peter Matabula. So having come through that kind of school, I was more interested in boxing, the control of boxing and how it worked. But yes, I had to fight to get that experience.
What was your record?
As an amateur, nothing. I won a couple of fights. I must have had about 12 or 15 fights. When you call it legal fights, it's you fight championships or school championships. I lost to Sydney Bench. So it was it's quite different in the fact you could have you have 2 or 3 fights a night when you're going up into championships. It was different in the amateurs. But no, I didn't have a big amateur record. And when I turned pro, it was the same thing. I only had 7 fights. I drew 2 and lost the rest. But sometimes you are what they call an opponent. So I'll give you an example. When they approached me to fight Kali Knutse, Kali Knutse had a big name in rugby at that time, in provincial rugby. He was turning pro as a fighter, and I was to be his first pro fight. So if you look at the record, you'll find that I fought Kali Knutse in his first pro fight. I think it was my second. But having said that, when I say you pay an opponent, so I was paid 200 Rand.
Just that's a lot of money back then.
I'll explain it to you now. I was paid 200 Rand and he was paid 80 Rand.
I thought you were going to tell me your first fight was 2 Rand, 5 Rand.
Yeah, I was paid 200 Rand. Now, in my first fight, I was also paid 80 Rand. That was the going rate for a 4-rounder.
Okay.
So with 80 Rand, don't forget, I was an apprentice electrician. And at that time, I was probably earning about 50, 60 Rand a week. And thinking of getting married by the time I was 19, 20. But having said all that, to come back to the pricing of a fighter, they wouldn't have paid me that kind of money if I was, call it a good prospect.
Yeah.
Because they had to get someone to fight Kali.
Building his record.
And you could look at the records of Kali Knutse, Jimmy Abbott, and I also fought Jimmy, by the way. And you could look at the records of Gerrie Coetzee. It wasn't too long before they would fight international fighters. And you got to remember, if you look back even at Golden Gloves and the fights they were involved in, where you had 93,000 people coming to a stadium, this does not happen anymore.
Yeah.
So right now, Golden Gloves is still, as you can see, we live on Super Sport on most of the tournaments or all the tournaments, and we still draw the crowds. But it takes proper matching to have that happen. You got to have the right fights, you got to have the right fighters for people to still want to come to boxing. But getting back to my side of things now, so having fought guys like Kali Knutse and Jimmy Abbott, they both stopped me. There was nowhere for me to go. I had 7 fights. Drew 2 and I lost the rest. One was on a cut eye, the other was I was knocked out by Kali and I was knocked out by Jimmy. But if you take, and like I was trying to explain to you, as we learn, would I have done it today? If I knew what I know today, would I have done it? No. Because the worst thing you can do now my biggest blessing was to work with Golden Gloves, because you get the opportunity to work with the international market. You get the opportunity to travel and see how things are done. You get the opportunity to go to the medical seminars, which I loved, at the WBC. Wherever I went for Golden Gloves, I always ended up in the medical side of it. What I believe should happen and shouldn't happen. And that is why I'm, as the fight commissioner well, I call myself the fight commissioner or the coordinator, tournament coordinator for Golden Gloves. I'm able to scrutinize before I sign a fighter. I look for the little signs when you approaching a fighter. If you come to a tournament, you've been to a lot of our weigh-ins, our pre-fight medicals and our weigh-ins. If you had to take the time to watch me, the first thing I do, I watch every fighter that comes in with their trainer. I go and introduce myself if they don't know me, or I go and shake hands with them. And I do it for a specific reason. I look at the inside of their mouth to see if I see dryness. I look at the way they walk, because if they're dehydrated, you can pick it up. You can even pick it up in the step. But this is after my 50 years in the game. And this is after being with fighters and with trainers that were really, really classy people. Willie DeWiel once said something to me that's, it stuck by me for so many years. He said to me, well, you would speak like Chaya. You wouldn't call you Jeff. He said, Chaya, when you hit a man with a left hook, don't hit him with the right hand. Because what you're going to do is you're going to bring his brain up straight. He says, when you hit him with a left hand, hit him with another left hand. It stayed with me for so many years. And then you realize when you're in a position, I won't say I'm in a position of authority, but I'm in a position where I have to care for the fighters. I have to care who fights who. I have to care whether it's not a mismatch. I have to care that the fights go through as equal. Each fighter has a chance. You must never say it's a warm-up fight or it's this kind. No, I can't. I got to look past the warm-up fight, because the first thing that you find, sometimes I walk into a toilet at the change room, and I'll see a fighter standing on his head with his legs up. Now, they do that. Fighters do that, or trainers do that. When a fighter has got a couple of ounces to lose still, or kilos to lose, it changes the weight slightly. It's an old practice from old fighters. I go hysterical because the hardest thing of boxing, of any boxing, is dehydration. Now, you take a guy like Brian Mitchell. Man, he never stopped running. He never stopped working. He never stopped training. He was such a busy fighter. He was such a great fighter because the fitness came first. But also, he was fit in the correct way. He never had to pull weight. He stayed junior lightweight all through. He would control that weight, and he'd work hard to do it. And that is where the boxers of today you can learn. I'll tell you just a brief story of what happened to me. I got cut in a fight with Martin Barnard, and the doctor stitched me straight after the tournament at ringside, and he stitched me. And what he said to me was, I'm giving you, his name was Dr. Clive Noble. He was the board doctor at that time. And what he said to me was, I'm giving you a double stitch, and I'll explain it. He stitched, it'll never be cut again. He stitched the eye internally, and then he stitched the eye again on the outside. And I was so fascinated. I followed all his write-ups on boxing, because the WBA took him on and he became the medical personnel for the WBC, the WBA. And going to all these seminars, he would use simple methods to show you or to teach you on dehydration. And one of them was, I can never forget it, it's embedded in my brain. He says that if you take your fist and declare that that's your brain, or we're talking about in a way to show you, not declare, to show you, and that's your skull. Between the brain and the skull is a fluid that protects the brain. Hanging from the brain through the skull is these tiny little veins that hold the brain, that in fact the brain floats in the skull. And when you dehydrate, the first thing that happens is you lose that fluid. Right. So the fluid from your spine, the fluid between that. So when you see people training, their hearts out to make weight, you know that they've lost that fluid, and they are already in a danger zone. I call it the danger zone, and that's why I look at the medical side of it every time I look at a fighter. I see to make sure that. So the trainers that don't do it correctly put the fighters in a position. Anyway, that's on the medical side. Let's talk about.
But now, if the weigh-in was the day of the fight, then surely you'd eliminate a lot of that.
No, it's the other way around. Because what happens is, being the day before, you're able to hydrate. So
the problem with that is you can now have a boxer come into the ring being 2 or 3 kilos heavier than his opponent.
It wouldn't be that much.
Dangerous.
It wouldn't be that much, but every single fighter that goes to the weigh-in the day before will be slightly heavier on the day, because they're going to have a meal. Now, one of those things, coming back to what I was saying earlier about when I look at a fighter and what I want to see in a fighter, is that if I notice, and Dr. Salepi, who's our present board doctor, will verify what I'm saying to you, because what happens is, if a fighter looks to me like he pulled weight, and I see the changes in the mouth, and I can see the way he walks, but he makes the weight, I go to Dr. Salepi. We have an understanding. And I say to him, Doc, we'll have to make it to that dressing room, and this fighter has to be retested. I've done it with a lot of fighters. I've even cancelled fights.
Have you? Have you cancelled any big fights?
No, not the big fights. The big fights have specialised trainers. I mean, they know what they're doing. They know how to look after their fighter. You very, very seldom will you get that happening in a big fight, but you do get it. You do get it, but you could cancel it. So in the case of what I was saying to you locally, Dr. Salepi would come in early, and he would make his rounds with me. He'd go with me from change room to change room. He would introduce himself. He'd say, I'm the doctor on the night, and I'm just having a look. Now, not to get it wrong, the fighter that was underweight, I deliberately do it, and I go and we check him again, and Dr. Salebi will give me the thumbs up. Hour before the tournament. I've had to cancel before. I cancelled Grand Fourie. He'll tell you, Grand Fourie came to the weigh-in. He never told us he was ill. He had picked up some bronchitis. We picked it up on him, and he said to me, no, he's been under medication, and he's feeling 100% better. And the doctor and I, we said, look, we can't, please give me a chance. So I said to the doctor, in fairness, let's weigh him, let's check him the following day at the fight, which we did, and we said, no, Grant. Because the doctor knows.
Yeah.
He knows what his
Can't
pulse,
take a chance.
he knows everything. And we cancelled it and announced it The fact that he was at the weigh-in, never told us, was wrong. His trainers should have told us. But
that's the
to have
competitive
a
nature of a
competitive
boxer.
and to have the guts and they want to fight, even if their little fingers hurting or whatever the case may be, they come to fight. So from a medical side of it, I think Rodney trusts me, Golden Gloves trust me implicitly that I will make sure that all the correct methods are taken when the overseas fighters arrive. We have to have the brain scan, we have to have the medical, we have to have all the necessary clearances that both fighters climbing that ring have an even chance. See, so that's the love side of my boxing that I love to do, to make sure that the fighters are safe and they have an equal opportunity to fight. Like people would say, but gee, you were a small guy, you were a middleweight. Why were you fighting Kali Knutsa? Why were you fighting Jimmy Abbott? Why were you sparring with Mike Schutter when you basically an overblown light heavy? Because, I fought as a light heavy, but I could easily have fought as a middleweight. But we never trained like the fighters trained. So my seriousness as a fighter was ridiculous because I just fought because it was there and everybody fought and the school and, you're fighting, you say inside or outside. That's how it was. We were apprentices, we were young guys. But if I know what I know today and I can teach people to do it the right and the correct way, boxing is a very, very hard sport. And it takes the best to survive. And if you look at fighters like Koopman and Knapp, on our side, we're talking about our fighters right now, and Taysa and these guys, geez, man, they train their heart out, and they've got good trainers. You take little Malajika's improvement right now. You take Vuzim Tolo, you take Manny Fernandez, you can take the Koopmans, and all the trainers, Damien Durant. They're young guys. Well, not Manny. Manny's a little bit older, but I love Manny. But what's his name? The Durant and the younger trainers of today. You got Marco Lewis that's coming in, very nice, supporting, making sure there's backup for the fighters in sponsors and medical sides. And so, yes, we've got it all here, and we've got to exploit it, but we've got to do it correctly, the right way.
Who's the best trainer in South Africa at the moment?
It's very difficult to say who's the best because I'm not with them at every training session. But you do have very good trainers. Up until a year or two ago, you had a guy like Norman Schlabani, who was a great trainer. I've known him all my life. You have, of course, Peter Smith, you have Nick, you have Peter Smith's brother, Sean, you have Damien Durant, and
Harold.
Well, Harold is a great trainer in his time. Can you imagine, put yourself in a position, 19 defenses. 19. We're not talking about one or two defenses and you lose your title. We're talking about a welterweight that is still a welterweight, Harold Volbrecht. He's phenomenal. I mean, 19 successful defenses. There's nobody that can do it. Makaningi did it. He managed to get 10 defenses. But 19 title defenses is something special. And we don't have what we had in the past, so we can't compare the past. Brian Mitchell was fighting 20-round fights. Or was it 15?
15 rounds.
15-round fights, sorry. But his fitness at 15 rounds. And the fighter comes today and he can't do 4 rounds, then you've got a problem.
But that's the trainer's fault,
That's
though,
the
right?
trainers. But that's as much the fighter. The fighter has to understand what it's all about. It's a hard game. I've been fortunate when I was younger, when I was telling you a little bit about the sparring. Sparring was different then because you had so many fighters. So if you were called to spar, if Alan Tuil Sr. wanted me to spar with the likes of Mike Schutter or later on Pierre Kutza, I would earn 25 Rand a round. You know, so 25 Rand a round is pocket money. You know, it's nice. So you go and spar and you make yourself 100 Rand on the night. I'm just giving you an example. Sparring with Victor Galendis was something else. Victor Galendis fought 4 times in South Africa. He was an icon. He was a great fighter. But you do pick up a lot of experience. But the problem with that is being a sparring partner, you can get hurt. Being an unfit sparring partner, you've got big problems. I sparred with Pierre Kutzer once, and he cracked my rib. And 10 weeks later, they phoned, please come, please, we really need you. I said, I'll come. He's going to stay out my rib. He's broken my rib already. And I went back and sparred with him again, and he cracked my rib again. But the problem is, when you get older, that is the last thing you should be doing. You've got to remember, I probably give Pierre 10 years or 12 years. I'm an old man coming back to spar. You don't do it. You're only going to get hurt, and I got hurt. So you don't ever think that you're good enough to take on those guys that are doing it on a daily basis, getting up in the morning, running, going to gym at night, 7 days a week. And you just come and say, okay, I'll spar with you, spar 3 or 4 rounds. You're looking for trouble.
Yeah.
Because what happens is later as you go, you find that you have bruising on the brain. You could see Muhammad Ali, how he suffered years later. Most fighters, they do so much. A lot of fighters get dementia. And it's not easy. It's a hard game. So the main thing of it all is to be fit, to train hard, to have a good trainer, able to wrap your hands correctly, to you know, you got to know the rules and the rights of boxing. It's just, everything resolves around the fighter. You know, if you look at potential, you had people with talent, Johnny Deploy,
Tommy Oosthuizen.
One
One of my favorite boxers of all time, man.
Yes, so the people with talent, you know, they have such an ability, natural talent, and Johnny was one of them. He had that natural talent, but he was naughty. So, you know, he loved the fast lane, and this is how it goes. But coming back to my personal things, the sparring in my life was nice. The time I got appointed onto a world body, it was a small world body.
How did you go from boxer to administrator?
Well, you started, you see, boxing was different in those days. You had provinces. It's still like that in the Act, but be it as may, you had provinces. You had then it was the Transvaal, Cape, you know, you had the various provinces. And each province had their own boxing border control. They ran it. At head office, you had the main one, like you got now, but each province had their own attorneys, their own team, and they were independent. So I was stood in Gauteng, and I didn't stand. You get elected, you get nominated, and then you go to a conference, and at the conference the elections take place. So that's how it worked. So it doesn't work that way anymore. So when the minister appointed me, Minister Balfour appointed me in a letter, I treasure it because at the time it was the licensees, only the licensees that elected you. So you go to the conference and your name has come up, and right there and then you get elected. And that's how I was elected. And it's not like that now. Names come forward, and it's only one body at head office. So that's a little bit lacking from, you know, that I believe. It's still in the Boxing Act. To me, it's clear, but people don't read it. So, but let's see how things go from here.
Didn't you run BSA at one point?
I was a board member, but we run it exactly the same. You have the board. Each one has certain commitment to the board. I was a press officer at the time, and I became a commissioner. So the commission is, you sit at the commission and the scorecards get brought to you and you add the scorecards up, but you control the show. So whether it was me that was brought on or Boise and Bar or whoever it was at the time for that specific tournament. Don't forget, those years we had 365 tournaments. It's almost crazy. We had a tournament on a Friday night. We had a tournament on a Saturday night. So boxing was so different than what it is today. There were so many fighters. There were so many tournaments. It was run totally different to what it's run today. And yes, I was a fight commissioner. I served on the board as a member of the Gauteng Boxing Commission. And we all had our duties. We would meet after the tournament and assess the punishment levels that boxers took. We would even have to look at some of the fights to see the decision was a correct decision. And that's what we did, like on a Tuesday or a Thursday or both, after a weekend to assess the tournament.
When you were on the board and had to go through boxing tournaments and fights and officials, any stories you want to share with us? Anyone bust doing something they shouldn't have? Or
yeah, it's very how can I say, there's good sides of it and there's bad sides of it. And unfortunately, sometimes here and there something crops up, like the illegal bandaging of hands and the illegal taping of the gloves, and that today they don't look for. We call it skinning the gloves. So what happens is, now I know today, because I also control the gloves. The gloves come back with me, and I hang them up to air them, because you're allowed to use a glove after a main fight once or twice in the smaller fights. But I do, one of the big reasons I do take the gloves and hang them up and look after them is I can see when a fighter is doing what we call skinning the gloves. So what happens is they tie the laces and they pull the skin, they pull the actual glove tight against their hand, and then they tape with a tape that even the name of the brand is covered. Then you know the gloves have been skinned. So the duty of the referee. What's
the benefit of a skinned glove?
Well, you did have a 10 ounce, and now you've got a 6 ounce. So what happens is the glove, you tighten the glove so that all the padding is pulled back. So you're hitting with virtually with a protected.
You're moving the foam out the way.
You move the foam right down. So today it becomes more difficult to do it today, because in the old days you had the horsehair. So the horsehair, when you watch a fight, the trainer's got the glove on and he's pushing the glove back. Even today, when I see it, I say, stop that. Don't tamper with the gloves, because then you're tampering with the gloves. You're moving the foam. You're trying to move the foam back to pull it tight. And those are just the little things that fighters do. Fighting is too controlled now. They can get away with that, but there's nothing else that people can really get away with. In the past, there's been fighters that have been found to put a little bit of plaster. They call it, the powder that hardens.
Plaster Paris.
When you put water with it, they would put it on dry at the time, but water the guys down. As the fight goes on, those gloves are wetter and wetter, and then they become hard. So when you're putting the gloves on, they have already done something, tampering. We call it tampering.
And the old deep heat on the glove.
Oh, you see that, but that's all gone. You know, that did happen in the early years. There was scope, but I think the people that run boxing have slowly, you know, if you take Mauricio Silliman, his father, you know, was taught his son. So it comes down. I met him when he came to South Africa. Fantastic man. And the WBC, they look at things like this. The WBA, they look at things like this. The gloves are important. If you go into a big fight, like some of our guys have been in those big fights, when you're selecting gloves and when you're in the rules meeting, boxing is safe from that side. You know, they do things properly. And we do things properly at Golden Gloves. At our press conferences, I mean, at our rules meeting, I'm around the rules meeting all the time. I make sure that the officer in charge or the official in charge has all everything at his disposal, the different gloves that we present. You can't just present a pair of gloves and say, you've got to fight in these gloves. You've got to present, as a promoter, you present 2 or 3 pairs of gloves for the fighters to choose from. So you've got to agree on the glove. The glove has to be the right glove for both fighters. Yeah, so that's, as I am now as a fight coordinator, my job is also to see, you know, we were blessed to have sponsors. We're blessed to have Empress Palace, and we're blessed to have Supersport, because the package that we give, everybody works together. You know, you've been there, you've seen it all. It's got to be right. Everything's got to be right. And you know, and I admire you for always coming out so early and checking that the lights are right and that everything is right. And we deliver. But it's teamwork. It's not individual teamwork. So that's basically that side of it. From my own personal side, having been in the game for 50 years, having seen it all and knowing it all, would I like it to change? Yes, I would. There's a lot of things I would like to change.
Did you ever train?
I trained fighters, yes. I trained my brother for a bit. You must remember, when you're a second, you are in fact a second, but you still do the hand pads, you still do all the physical work as a second. You're just not the main trainer. I was a main trainer. We took Patrick Matabula for 3 successful title defences. I was training him. And you have, like, if your main trainer's not there, you're in charge of training. So yes, I trained quite a few youngsters. I've had a few gyms. We've got a gym now as well in Yeovil, which I'm partners with Marco and Brian Mitchell.
Edenvale.
In Edenvale. So yeah, we're still doing it even at this age. But the big thing, my number one thing on boxing is safety. That's it. I mean, safety, and to give the guys a fair fight. You know, there's no point to people say we got to build this guy, so we give him a fight, and the fighter shouldn't be in the same ring. You know, nowadays the British standard of boxing has led the way, in a sense, for the safety side. They look at every aspect, the age, the longevity, how long you've been fighting for. They look at the punishment levels, and then they rate you.
Except for the 3 knockdown rule that they got wrong.
Well,
that puts a boxer at risk, in my opinion.
But it depends. Yeah, it depends on how you see it. You do put the boxer at risk, but it's not always the case, because sometimes a knockdown is not a clear punch. It's got to be a solid, clear punch. And in the case I think you're talking about, it was reversed and our fighter got beat. But that shows you that it could have been either way. You know, so their decision was right for them. It happened with Nap and Dombassi as well, the 3-fight rule here in South Africa. But if you look at it differently, the referee has the right to let it go or to stop it. It's not just an automatic. If you have a rules meeting and you sit at the rules meeting and you apply the 3-fight rule and you say
3 knockdown.
In South African rules, a 3-fight knockdown, that's it. But a knockdown can be determined, not a slip, not your glove just touches the canvas because you were hit and you were off balance. You got to be knocked down. So some people look at it differently. But a proper knockdown, yes. If you knock down 3 times, then you're looking for trouble.
Yeah.
But if you get up and you knock your guy out so easily, or your guy quits after that, then the decision was right to let it go. Because the fight in the first place wasn't hurt. But it's always a calculated risk. But a lot of other countries don't emphasize it, and you've got to work according to certain rules. Now, when you're fighting, as an example, if you're fighting according to the IBF rules or the WBC rules, and then you want to implement the South African rules, then you have a bit of a conflict. So you've always got to be sure that you're working with a body whose rules are that, and it's approved by BSA. So BSA say the WBA make application, they accept the WBA. So they accept the WBA rules. But they may have their own rules that if you've got a beard, you've got to cut the beard. Whereas that becomes a fight because this is a WBC world title fight and they don't. What if you've got a beard? I'm just using a beard side of it. So you can't always rely on the rules in that manner. There's a lot of agreement at a rules meeting between everybody before you sign it off.
You also went into publishing. At one point you had your own magazine.
Well, that's the love of what we do. You know, to have a magazine this is the African Ring. That's what I was doing. And you can see, look, there's Brian Mitchell and Sylvester Stallone. It's phenomenal, the people that Brian has met. Yes, it's because of the love of my collection. One of my passions is I'm a collector. So I've got thousands of books, thousands of magazines, pictures out of this world from way back, from 110 years, signatures from 110 years. I collect because my love for it, and anything that I can find on boxing, I'll buy it. So what can I do? The 50 years that I've served as a servant of the sport, I've met wonderful people. I've trained with lovely people. And I always tell Rodney, one of the things that I love the best out of all of this, and my wife as well, don't forget, she's been side by side for the full 50 years with me doing boxing, giving me part of her salary to pay purse monies. I would go collect on a Wednesday if it's near the end of the month and cash her check so that I could pay the purse monies. The purse monies those years we paid the day before. Anyway, cut it short, she's been there and she's done it. But the thing about meeting people, and she knows it too because it happens to her, we may not see a fighter for 5 or 10 years, but he fought at our little show at Brixton Palace. He never forgets us.
Yeah.
He was on that tournament, and he would come, hello, Auntie Marty, hello, Uncle Jeff, and then you say to yourself, that is what it was all worthwhile.
Boxing is very much a family-orientated sport.
Yes, it is. I've seen people take their front teeth out at the show and shout on the top of the voice, and then put their teeth back. So at ringside, a lot of things have happened, and there's been good times, there's been bad times, but it's always been, to me now, if I look back on it all, it's been worth every second of the day.
How did you and Rodney come together?
He supported me very much in the little shows I did, like he does now. You'd help a promoter to promote. So what happened is how we actually joined. We knew each other from far back, and he would help me. I was one of the trainers of Johnny Deploy, for argument's sake, and before that he needed a fighter to fight Johnny, my brother. I brought my brother along. I was training my brother at that time. So we had fights on Golden Glove shows, but I also had a little promotion which I did myself, and it was a family promotion. Me, my wife, my sons, my kids. My sons sold hamburgers. My other sons sold the programs, and the other daughter took the money at the till. So I'm just saying, it's always been one of those things. But Rodney supported a couple of my shows. So he would put fighters on and he would pay for the purses. And sometimes he would let me handle it and he would pay for the purses. But then in 2020, I think it was 20 or 2021, Shona called me and asked me if I would do a program. They're going to bring, because program's my life. I love doing the boxing program. That's the history of it. You see on your walls, all of these had programs. And so the poster and the program go hand in hand. So when you do a program, one of my passions as a youngster of 9 or 10, going to the Rand Easter show and selling programs. I used to sell programs. So when the boxing came, I loved programs. So my collection of programs is astonishing. You won't believe my program. So when Shona called me and asked me, said that I was on the commission, I think I was at that time, but Rodney needed a program, and they liked what I had done, and they needed a program for Lennox Lewis. So the Lennox Lewis program I did in conjunction, of course, with Sun International. So they did the printing and I did the design and put it all together, and that was the first one. And that was so popular that all the Sun International hotels on the night of the fight, because the fight was in the early morning. If you remember, we had fights in that day, and then the following early morning we had Lennox Lewis come on to go live. And we would then sell the programs to all the casinos. My sons were driving to sell the programs, to take programs to the various places where they wanted like Sun International's resorts. And it was such a success. Since then, Rodney has used me for the programs, and we've done a lot of shows together since then. And he's helped me and supported me throughout the last 20, 25 years that I've been doing, and entrusted me with the show itself. The funny thing about Rodney, he doesn't interfere. He tells you what he wants, and if you're capable, he lets you do it. That's what it's all about. So.
You also received a Lifetime Achievement Award from BSA.
I've received I was mentioning Mauricio Suleiman, the son, at one of the fights in Monte Carlo. Just called me into the ring. I was down on the side, and he called me into the ring, and he said to me, he's been watching me in the ring, He's been watching me since he arrived, the way I do things, the way I plan things, my press conferences and everything, and it never went unnoticed. And he presented me with a medal. He said, your blood runs green, and I want you to take this on behalf of the WBC for your commitments. So, it was extremely lovely for me. From BSA, I got a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2018 for my contribution to boxing. And I've had one or two through the years also from BSA for my commitment. So, the awards, I told you, my biggest award is when that little fighter comes and puts his arms around me. That's my biggest award, the reward. So I'm pleased to have these days in boxing, because the earlier years of boxing was all different. What we have now, and I'm still there, and we're doing it differently. We do box and dines and the top shows that we're putting on now. But there's a new era coming in boxing. You can feel it.
Jeff, thanks for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for always being there for us. Appreciate it. Sorry I talk so much, but anyway.